I have actually been involved with smoked salmon for a little over 40 years now. And the intro for me actually started back in New England when I went to school in Rhode Island. I spent 4 years in a business program at Roger Williams University. And when I was not studying, my father, who was my supporter and the fellow that helped me get through school, had a deal with me. And he said, when you're not going to school, you need to work. And he said, I'm not going to tell you what that needs to be, but I want you to work. So the folks that I had met in Rhode Island early on were an interesting group of guys that were involved with the University of Rhode Island Fisheries School. And I very quickly learned to look up to them, to admire them. And I really wanted to learn what I could about their dedication to being in that school of fisheries. And they saw, and through my travels with them, they thought, you could be a good candidate for working on a commercial fishing vessel when you're off for summers. So I actually was able to secure a job out of Newport, Rhode Island on the back of a lobster boat. And that was my intro to being connected to the water off the coast of Rhode Island. That went pretty well, and it was comfortable for me. And that led me to actually securing a position in the winter. When I went to school, in the winters, many colleges actually closed for 4 to 6 weeks. They were fighting the energy crisis. They wanted to cut back and try to conserve where they could. So I had a block of time in the winter that was available. And I then worked for another fellow on a dragger. And I fished for blackback flounder for 4 to 6 weeks, again, as a kid going through school. But those experiences that I had led me, when I finished school, to announcing to my mother and father that I wanted to fish commercially. And the folks with the lobster boat offered me a 1-year opportunity if I wanted to go with them and fish offshore. So after a couple road trips, my mom and dad coming up from New Jersey, where I was raised, we talked through this, and they said, look, if this is really what you want to do, we're with you. And I graduated in May, and 2 weeks later, I started to fish offshore on a lobster boat. And it was an experience for me that certainly was life-changing. But I think from May, I made it to the following March or April before I really fell apart. And that falling apart was physical, mental, spiritual. I just really hit the wall. Parents came up, back to New Jersey, got me back on my feet. And at that point, my father wanted to know what was going to be next. Wasn't really quite sure. And he suggested that we take a trip to Brooks Brothers to get a couple suits. And that was going to equip me for going down to Wall Street and knocking on doors and trying to talk my way into a job. That lasted a day. And after one day of literally doing that, I put my sport jacket over my shoulder, and I walked from Wall Street to South Street, which is where the old Fulton Fish Market used to be located. Bumped into a fellow that owned a business right on South Street, looked at me, engaged in conversation, and I told him the backstory that I'm sharing with you. And he said, I'll tell you what, you come here. I'll offer you a job. You can be an apprentice. Let's see what happens. But he said, your work schedule is, I want you here at 11 o'clock tomorrow night, and you'll work until the job is done. And I can tell you that that'll probably be late morning, 10, 11 in the morning. You'll go home, and then you come back again. I did actually work in the Fulton Fish Market. I'm a survivor. I made it through the Fulton Fish Market, was there for a little over a year. And during that time, I met a variety of folks who happened to be connected to the seafood industry that were working off of the Fulton Fish Market. They were suppliers, they were customers, truckers, other members of the Fulton Fish Market. And one day I met a couple guys that actually owned a smokery, a salmon smokery in Brooklyn. And they offered me an opportunity to come out, take a look at their operation. And they said to me that one thing that they didn't have was a youth movement. These are two older fellows. They didn't have kids that were really looking to come in and take over the business. And they were very hot to find and attract young guys to come in the business. I went over. I couldn't believe, I had never seen anything. I had never been to Brooklyn, had never seen a smokery. I had never seen this type of activity. But one thing that I could see quickly was there was a roof over my head. There was no wind. There was no rain, which I had to work through during the Fulton Fish Market. That was rain, sleet, snow. And they said, you know, you come in now in the market, you start at 11, you come here at 1:30 in the morning and we'll give you a break. So I took that job. And that was the beginning for me of intro to the smoked seafood industry, to that community, and it very quickly agreed with me. In addition to the work that I'm involved with the sales effort at Acme, I still play a significant role with our procurement of wild salmon. And the wild salmon at the Acme Smoked Fish Company is all actually produced in Alaska. We're at a point where we actually purchase 5 strains of salmon, and there are 5 in Alaska. We're involved with all of them. Fortunately for my procurement activities, work that I actually was involved in going back to the early 80s, still to this day play a role, and they actually collectively help me with the decision making as to what fish, what region, what company, what techniques are going to be used to help actually put together a package of wild salmon that we use. In addition to the farm-raised salmon that we're involved with, many of the customers that we serve, supermarkets and big box retailers, whether they're regional or they are nationally based companies, they all have a portion of their smoked salmon offering that is wild salmon. And we, in many cases, play a role in supplying that wild salmon. So my experiences of cultivating relationships with the companies that are strategically located in different regions in Alaska that have access to the fleets, the highliners, the blue chip fishermen we have relationships with. The fish is handled properly, it's frozen properly, it's transported to our specifications, and collectively it enables us to serve and satisfy the needs of the most discriminating retail outlets and food service outlets who are looking for wild salmon. And today the fish that is actually caught in Alaska all falls under the MSC certification, which is becoming more and more appealing and attractive to these customers. In many cases, it's become a requirement, and the fact that we have access to these fish in the quantity and the quality that we actually demand it puts us in a very unique place, and in many cases it allows us to really serve and satisfy the needs of some of the most discriminating customers that are interested in still carrying and offering wild salmon.